All right, what is up? Today I will be ranking the ABBA discography, the undisputed kings of Europop. ABBA is arguably my favorite non-metal band of all time, and today we're going to be counting down all their albums with the exception of Voyage, which came out a couple years ago. It's just one I wanted to exclude because I wanted to talk about the classic and OG ABBA. So let's get it started. I got some notes because I am a professional music reviewer. So to start this off, number 8 is their first album, Ring Ring. This is a pretty decent record, but I feel like overall, as a whole album, it really lacks in cohesiveness and character. And it's a lot more rock and groove based as opposed to maybe that more like disco, dance, and pop style that ABBA would really become quite known for. And while this is rounding up the last of the list, I don't think this is a terrible album by any means. I just think if you listen to the whole thing through, it's kind of maybe a little bit more of a task than it is enjoyable. That being said, I think some of the like standalone songs are really good. The title track, Ring Ring, Disillusion, both of those songs I like to listen to a lot. I don't usually put on the full record. And there's some other songs like Nina Pretty Ballerina. It's a very promising song. It's got some cool melodies, but I just think it's like poorly written. It doesn't go anywhere. And this definitely showcases what ABBA would become, and you can kind of hear that like bright and optimistic sound, but overall I just think it falls short as like a full listen, and it, as can be expected, it's the band's first album. That being said, it is kind of cool to hear some of those songs that have more of like old school rock and like blues influence rather than what they would go on to do with the more pop based stuff. So rounding out the last on this list is Ring Ring at number 8. Next up is The Visitors, which was their last album. And despite the low ranking on this list, I think this album is incredibly well written, and it has some super impressive musical moments and songwriting. The track I Let the Music Speak, to me, is like, that's one of my favorite ABBA songs, and I think that's the pinnacle of like ABBA's progression. I don't think it really represents like what the band was all about, but in terms of seeing their musical growth and orchestration and really impressive vocal work, I think that is a highlight on this album. And I think when it comes to like looking at Frida's vocal performances, I Let the Music Speak is probably my favorite. It's really flashy, and it's got a lot of interesting melody lines. It just reminds me of something you'd hear in like a musical as like the grand finale. And yeah, this is also an album where listening to the whole thing can sometimes be a little bit tedious. I think like the first song, the title track, isn't super good, but there are a couple other songs that I do very much enjoy. Head Over Heels, Soldiers, and Slipping Through My Fingers are all great tracks. I think those three kind of embody what ABBA is about in terms of a lot of like synthesizer work and, you know, bright vocal melodies, but it's being combined with a little bit more of that like advanced and in-depth songwriting. And I think that's kind of what this album has to offer. When I think of The Visitors, you know, the whole band and Benny and Bjorn were clearly upping their songwriting and their orchestrations. But despite the advanced musical work, I do think it lacks a little bit of the simplicity and the danceability that kind of makes ABBA enjoyable for me, and I assume for most people. But that being said, I think this album is, on a technical and songwriting level, pretty impressive, but it does fall a little bit short in terms of albums that, you know, I really want to listen to the entire way through. Next up, we have the self-titled album, which was their third release. And, you know, this is where the band really started to find their signature sound. You got the undisputed classics like Mamma Mia, SOS, and Bang a Boomerang. And, you know, you can really tell if you were to listen to like all these albums or analyze them chronologically, this is where ABBA like finally evolves into the band that the world would know and love. It has a lot of really well done songwriting, except the main focus is still just like bright vocal melodies, catchy songs. And this album is probably the best example of that. If you just want like quick, catchy tunes that are super memorable, they're really fun. I think this album definitely showcases the band in that way. And while I was saying there's like a lot of simplicity in terms of like, the famous tracks like Mamma Mia and SOS, there is some cool musical work. The instrumental intermezzo #1, that's a really neat, flashy song. That's like if Dream Theater was good, that's how I describe it. And yeah, I think this is a super great album, but I do think it lacks on the B side. Because when I listen to it, I think most of the best tracks are front stacked on the A side. So kind of on the second half of the album, I do think it falls off a little bit. And this is clearly where the group starts to find their sound. Going on to number 5 is Super Trooper. This was their 7th album. And to me, this is where it starts getting like A material. All the rest of these albums on this list, I can listen to all the way through and for the most part enjoy every song, which is my first note on Super Trooper. This is an album that just has excellent flow. The whole development and pacing of this album is really, really well done. It's very balanced in terms of, you got those songs that make you want to get up and go dancing, or you got those like thought-provoking ballads with some nice keyboard work or some synthesizers. And yeah, the title track is like, it reminds me of peak, disco era, peak disco vibes, wearing your aviators at night and grooving out to some nice trippy synthesizer music. I love the title track. Winner Takes It All, one of my favorite ABBA songs and probably the highlight on the album for me. I said Frida's best vocals was on I Let the Music Speak, and I think this is definitely Agnetha's best performance. It's a very emotive song, nice, slow, simple ballad, but nonetheless brings out her amazing vocal range and really good performance. Other good ones are Me and I and Lay All Your Love on Me. I think this is the album that, if you're looking to get up and just have a nice time and get on the dance floor, Super Trooper is the album for you. And number 4 is The Album. This was their 5th album. And I think this one is kind of where you see their in-depth songwriting while also still retaining that classic ABBA sound. And what I mean by that is this album showcases the side of the group taking like pretty advanced concepts, whether it's, some more like flashy performance on the keyboards and guitars, or, like different types of song structures, while combining it with like the vocal melodies and the really easy to listen to choruses, things that you can, remember off your first listen. I think this album does an excellent job of that. The opening track, Eagle, is, it gives me like prog rock vibes. And that's where I think Benny and Bjorn really showcase their songwriting well. That track also, I'm a Marionette, just kind of these interesting ways to go about writing pop songs while also still retaining like that, radio vibe and those things that you can just remember off your first listen. Other good tracks on this one are Take a Chance on Me, One Man, One Woman, and then probably in my top 3 ABBA songs is Thank You for the Music. I really enjoy that song. It's just a nice, well-made but simple track with some awesome piano playing, really cool chord progressions and vocal lines. So yeah, I think this is definitely kind of a record that it's probably one of their more unique albums in the discography, because it doesn't fit in a certain style. Something like Super Trooper is so consistent all the way through. It's very basic and laid back. This album has quite a bit of variation, and I would say it takes a little bit more of an advanced ear to listen to. But that being said, there's some great moments on there. And also, everyone knows, like, Take a Chance on Me. That's a prime example of ABBA utilizing all those nice, bright vocal harmonies to create some super rich textures. So going on next, we are in the top 3 now. We have Voulez-Vous. This is their 6th album, and I kind of describe this album as like the better half to Super Trooper in a way. I think those 2 albums are kind of the most similar in their discography. So just like Super Trooper, you have that really high level of danceability and groovy songs, except this album is not, flashy at all. It's all about straight groove. It's all about songs that make you want to dance and make you get happy. I think this is the album that really got me into ABBA, and that was when I was just, full on brutal death metal edgelord. You don't have fun when you listen to music. So hearing this album really like opened my perception, not just to like different styles of music, but to what it means to like really enjoy an album. It's just something that makes you want to like smile and have a good time, and I think that's why I really like this album, but also because the songs are really well done. The opener, As Good as New, is great. King Has Lost His Crown, Does Your Mother Know, and probably my second favorite ABBA track, If It Wasn't for the Nights. All are great tunes on this album. This is one where every single song is super well done. The flow's there, and it's just all about sitting back and listening to that groove, that bright like disco pop. Love this record. It's simple, it's easy, and it's memorable, and that is why it is taking bronze. And at number 2 is Waterloo. This is their 2nd album. Really great album, and I do think this is the most unique album in their discography because it is building off like kind of that traditional rock and roll style of Ring Ring, but it's now transitioning towards that signature ABBA sound of songwriting. So I think this is kind of their odd one out record, but it fits super well because the songs are really great, and I have it second, but it's probably my most listened to ABBA record. Minus Sitting in the Palm Tree. I don't know what was going on in that track. I love this album, but I always skip that track. It's kind of goofy. King Kong Song is a really cool old school rock riff, just with like a blues rock riff, super interesting. And this album utilizes mostly the female vocals, but you have songs like King Kong Song where you got a little more of that rock mentality with the male vocals behind it. And I think it's a little less built on like heavy hitter standalone songs like some of their other records, but the flow is amazing and it's really well written. This is an album that definitely grew on me. I think when I was first getting into ABBA, I listened to like the title track and maybe 1 or 2 others off this record, but I didn't think as an entire album it was that good. But as I, kept listening to it, it really started to climb the list. And I do think it is a really well done album and creates an interesting sound of like a transition period that the band totally hit on, and it sounds really good. And number 1 is Arrival, which is their 4th album. And, this is ABBA at their most distinct style. I think the first 2 tracks, When I Kiss the Teacher and Dancing Queen, are an immaculate way to open up an album. And, I can't really listen to either of those songs without one or the other, And there's very few bands, if any, where I think like their most popular song is actually my favorite song. The only band I can think of is ABBA. I do think Dancing Queen is the best and my favorite ABBA song, and it's their most popular, and I don't really think that happens a whole lot, so it's kind of interesting to have that happen. And yeah, this album is just, the flow is great, the cohesion is there. I think the band seems completely in sync with each other. Like the songwriting of Benny and Bjorn are perfectly complementing the vocals, and vice versa. It's like, I know that, the songwriting wasn't always up to the whole band. It was usually Benny writing a lot, but I just feel like the group is working as one unit on this album, and it really shows through in tracks like That's Me, My Love, My Life. You have awesome like dual vocal work between the ladies, which bless every ABBA record, but I think on this one, like just the cohesion of how both of their vocals fit with like some of the guitar riffs and the synthesizer works is just absolutely awesome. Money, 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 that's a really versatile song that grooves hard with like a really cool theme and bass line. And I'm glad that song's on the record because it kind of breaks up a little bit of the more slower and just like synthesizer based songs. That track's got a really cool like rock and bass line, and I think it's a great addition to this record. And the closing track, Tiger, is the perfect way to close. It's just a super grand song that brings a nice stamp of approval to the end. And I really like I don't think these tracks were part of the original press, but Fernando and Happy Hawaii, I think those are bonus tracks on some version, but I really do like those tracks. And I know Happy Hawaii is instrumentally another song on the album, but for some reason I prefer those lyrics in Happy Hawaii. And yeah, overall, this is just ABBA at their most classic. It has their most definitive songs, their most definitive sound. And, you know, usually when I'm thinking about like ranking songs or albums, more often than not, it's like as you become a super fan of a group, usually you gravitate towards like the deep cuts and maybe the songs that are less played. But I think that's, to me, what makes ABBA so special is like, you know, this is their most popular album, and I think it is their best, and it's just their greatest songs. And, you know, none of these have ever gotten old to me in the past, you know, 2 or 3 years of listening to this, and I think that's what makes this band and especially this album really special. So yeah, that is my personal ranking of the ABBA discography. Thank you for watching.